You hear it on the news all the time, right? The Fed is hiking interest rates, or cutting them. But what actually happens to the economy when they pull those levers? It seems like a simple question, but figuring out the answer is, well, it's a huge economic puzzle. And today, we're going to look at how economists have gotten really clever at solving it. I mean, seriously, you see the headlines, you hear the experts talk, the Fed's raising rates to cool down inflation, or they're cutting rates to get things moving again. It sounds so straightforward, but peel back that first layer and you find one of the toughest questions in all of economics. How do we know for sure that the Fed's action is what caused the outcome? Okay, so this is the heart of the problem. You've got two possibilities. On one hand, maybe the Fed is steering the ship, right? They turn the wheel and the whole economy changes course. But on the other hand, what if they're just reacting? What if the economy is already turning and the Fed is just responding to that? It's a total chicken and egg situation. Are they causing the change or just responding to it? Separating those two it's a real headache for economists. And here's what makes it so incredibly tricky. You know, if you're a scientist in a lab, you can run a controlled experiment. You have two petri dishes, you treat one, you leave the other alone, and you see what happens. But economists, they can't do that. We don't have a spare U.S. economy lying around that we can use as a control group where the Fed just does nothing. So how in the world can you ever be certain that it was the Fed's move and not a million other things that caused the economy to zig instead of zag?
So to get around this, economists have a kind of playbook. It was laid out by the Nobel Prize winner R.E. Lucas, and it's basically a three-step detective plan. Step 1, find a shock. This isn't just any policy change, it has to be a move that nobody saw coming. Think of it as finding a clear fingerprint. Step 2, once you've found that shock, you watch very carefully to see what happens next in the real economy. And step 3, you take that real-world reaction and see if your economic theories, your models, can actually predict it. If they can, you might be onto something.
Now, that all sounds pretty logical, right? But here's the catch. That first step, isolating a true, unexpected shock, is unbelievably hard. I mean, the economy's just this chaotic, noisy place with a million things going on at once. Trying to pinpoint the effect of one single Fed decision is like trying to hear one person whispering in the middle of a packed football stadium during a touchdown. It's almost impossible to separate the signal from all that noise.
So, how do they solve this? Well, this is where the genius of this research really shines through. It all hinges on a really clever idea about timing. Just imagine this. The Fed is like a speedboat. It can see new information and turn on a dime. But the broader economy? It's like a massive oil tanker. It's got so much momentum that it takes a long time to change direction.
Let's dig into that a little. The idea is that the Fed, in its speedboat, has all these fancy instruments. It gets real-time data, the latest economic weather report, if you will. It sees what's happening today with things like prices for raw materials or the latest job numbers.
But, and this is the absolute key, that giant oil tanker, the U.S. economy, doesn't react today. Big things like the overall economic output, or GDP, and the general level of prices, they only really start to turn tomorrow, metaphorically speaking. It just takes time for a change in interest rates to work its way through the entire system.
And that tiny little delay, that's everything. It's the whole game. That gap between the Fed's quick move and the economy's slow reaction creates this perfect little window of opportunity for researchers. It allows them to separate the Fed's predictable reaction to the day's news from the part of their decision that is a genuine, out-of-the-blue shock. And that is the breakthrough that lets them finally find that fingerprint in all the noise.
All right, so what did they find when they used this method? Check this out. This chart is basically the smoking gun. It shows what happens in the months following one of those surprise Fed rate hikes. Now look closely at the top left graph. That's economic output, GDP. Notice something? It doesn't drop immediately. There's a delay.
And that delay is exactly what the theory predicted. Here's what the data tells us loud and clear. When the Fed unexpectedly raises rates, economic output does fall, but not for about 2 quarters. The real punch doesn't even land for a year to 18 months. You get this very distinct hump-shaped response. And prices? Well, they're what economists call sticky. They barely budge for over a year. It's like they're set in glue.
Okay, that's a pretty cool statistical detective story, for sure. But you might be thinking, so what? Why does this matter to anyone outside of an economics department? Why should you care?
Well, it all goes back to that 3-step plan we talked about. The whole point of this exercise is to build better models of the economy. I mean, look at what Lucas himself said. We need to test if our models are useful imitations of reality. And this research gives us exactly that, a clean, real-world test. It shows us how the economy actually reacts, so we can see which of our theories get it right and which ones get it wrong.
And why do we care about better models? Because better models mean better tools for the people making huge decisions. It's like giving a pilot a more accurate weather forecast. If central bankers have a clearer idea of how their actions will ripple through the economy, they can make better decisions. Decisions that affect your job, the prices you pay, pretty much everything.
And this isn't just about the future either. It's about understanding our past. This kind of work helps us go back and answer some massive questions, like what really caused that runaway inflation back in the 1970s, and maybe more importantly, how do we make sure we don't make those same mistakes again? It gives us a lens to understand the real-world consequences of major policy choices.
So, when you boil it all down, what have we learned? By being incredibly clever about timing, researchers found a way to cut through the noise and see what a Fed policy shock truly does. They've given us a clearer picture of how this powerful economic engine actually works. And that leaves us with a pretty big thought to chew on. If we can get a really clear, accurate map of our economic past, does that mean we can finally learn to navigate the future just a little more wisely?